So, I was dreading this album's release. I've made it no secret that although a few years ago I called blink-182 one of my favourite bands of all time, the whole Matt Skiba era of the band has basically completely ruined them for me. California wasn't a terrible album, and it's one that I slightly look at more fondly than I did upon release, but the deluxe edition was horrendous. Their live performances are at an all-time low quality-wise, and the band marketing and everything has just become so cringy. Their constant attempts to be hip and cool with the kids is so embarrassing and completely ruined the band and even tainted much of the fond memories I had listening to them in the past. And the odds were completely stacked up against this album 9 being any good. Nearly every track on the album had like a million writers behind it. They were collaborating with pop writers like Pharrell Williams, The Futuristics, and Andrew Watt, and I hated all the pre-release singles upon first listening to them. I thought this album was going to be a huge mess, one of the worst albums of the year and the worst album of Blink's discography. So how in the world did I end up actually really liking this thing? Don't get me wrong, this album is heavily flawed. Like, if you listen to this thing and absolutely hated it, I would completely understand that. In fact, on first listening, I didn't like it either. But man, there's something about this album that made me keep coming back and listening to it again. The album is a spiritual successor to the band's self-titled album, which is still to date probably one of my top 10 favourite albums of all time. And although this album is nowhere near as good as that album, there are a lot of similarities on display here. Following the release of California, bassist Mark Hoppus fell into a deep depression, not just from his own personal problems, but also from the bad stuff surrounding him in the world. And that very dark lyricism is where much of the similarities between this album and the self-titled album stem from. The production of the album is also somewhat reminiscent, with a lot of vocal effects, pianos, and synthesizers. There are a few points where it kind of sounds like what they would have done if they recorded that album in 2019 and wanted to make it sound as modern as possible. And the production at times can be really interesting and different for the band, and at other times can be overly glossy and too similar to most generic pop music you'd hear on the radio. In fact, there are a few songs where the band definitely step away from the pop punk and kind of emo tinge of the album and delve more into straight up radio pop rock territories. Not something that is completely rare or new for them, but here it doesn't work as well as on something like All the Small Things did. The songwriting on these songs just aren't up to snuff with the older work. Darkside and I Really Wish I Hated You are the worst offenders of this and are, in my opinion, two of, if not just the two worst songs on the album. Although Darkside has a catchy chorus, there's nothing different about it, and the pre-chorus is so repetitive that it literally makes me laugh every time I hear it. I also think it's an example of a song on the album where the electronic modern pop sounds become too overpowering and don't really add anything to the song. I Really Wish I Hated You is a pure pop song. It literally could have been performed by any number of musicians and probably wouldn't have been any different whatsoever. The lyrics are pretty generic, the choruses are forgettable, the melodies aren't really anything special whatsoever. Although much of the album has a modern pop sound to it, this is the one song where they decided to let it completely take it over, and it ended up becoming one of the laziest tracks on the album. While every other song, even if it's incredibly flawed, has something I can compliment, this song has absolutely nothing. Blame It On My Youth does repeat a lot of these mistakes, but it's a song that I actually found grew on me over time. The song is very reminiscent of some of the better tracks of California, like San Diego, where instead of singing about youthfulness in a way that makes it sound like they're trying to act young and hip, they sing about it kind of nostalgically. And I think the references to the members' past work really well. The track is incredibly bouncy, catchy and fun, although the production does get a little bit tiring on this track also. When I first heard it, I honestly hated the direction that they took, but over time and in the context of the album, I'm definitely a lot kinder towards it now. The album's opener, The First Time, is one of the best songs on the album, and one of the best songs the band have done in over a decade. It obviously was made to be very reminiscent of Feeling This from the self-titled album, but I think it stands on its own as something kind of different. It's one of the most exciting, fast-paced and passionate tracks the band have done during the Skiba era of the band. The track Happy Days is another song that has much of that pop sound, but similar to Blame It On My Youth, I found it to be a song that really grew on me over repeated listens. The production is never overly glossy, and much of it reminds me of the sort of stuff that they were doing on their early 2000s stuff. It was cool cool to hear Mark have his own song again since he's not done that since Tom left, and because of that this song feels incredibly personal. Mark sings about his reservations towards the band and the self-doubt that he was feeling and about trying to overcome that and get into a better place. The song perfectly highlights one of the things I like the most about this album, and that is the lyrics. There are definitely songs where the lyrics are atrocious, and even on this song there's some questionable moments, but I definitely think the songwriting is a massive step up over what the band was doing on California. And I think the big reason for that is that Mark is at his best when he's writing about dark subject matters. The self-titled album Plus 44 and Neighborhoods all succeeded really well at this, but as he went back into writing youthful songs about having fun, it became generic and passionless. This is where it seems that Mark excels the most, and the songwriting here is some of the best Mark has done in years. I think the track Heaven also perfectly shows this off with some incredibly beautiful and poetic lyrics about gun control and the fear that is created for those living in America. Vocally, I think this is also one of the strongest songs on the album, especially from Matt, who has some of my favourite vocal melodies I've heard him do for Blink so far. It's obvious at times that they relied heavily on auto-tune on this album, including on this song, but I think the melodies make up for it. I also think production-wise is one of the strongest tracks on the album. Black Rain also has some really great production and easily some of the best instrumentation I've heard the band do in years. It's this really exciting hip-hop inspired track with some incredible guitar work and its relentless speed and aggression. It's the most unique Blink song I've heard in this new era of the band, and it's a perfect example of Matt Skiba bringing a lot of the sound of Alkaline Trio into the mix, creating a sound that never feels like he's trying to be someone else and feels like the band are actually working together for once. I love the lyrics on the track as well, in which they essentially criticize the idea of organized religion, with Matt coming out recently saying that he has no faith for the business of fear or warmongering. I think it's a really welcome diversion into a topic that feels different and mature for the band. Pin the Grenade is Blink doing what they do best. It's a fast, bouncy and fun pop-punk song about a broken relationship. The track also has one of my favourite choruses on the album. It's not groundbreaking, but I think it's really catchy and memorable. On Some Emo Shit is one of my favourites on the album as well, with, in my opinion, the best chorus of the whole album. It's very different to anything I've ever heard them do before. It's another delve into pop rock, but it works well because the lyrics and melodies are really well written. It's a breakup song with a slight hint of darkness and mysteriousness in its lyrics, where you're never sure what actually happens to the girl. The track Hung Over You displays the band blending some of the emo sounds of the self-titled album with a programmed hip-hop beat, and it's definitely a very interesting blend. It doesn't fail as much as something like I Really Wish I Hated You does, but I don't think it succeeds in every way. I don't think the verses are that great, and the pre-chorus is terrible and really awkward. However, the chorus is one of the most euphoric moments on the album. Matt basically screams the chorus, and that blended with the distorted synthesizers and heavy guitar lines create this really pounding and explosive sound that makes it stand out massively. The album closes with the track Remember to Forget Me, which in a lot of ways for me feels like almost a spiritual successor to Adam's song. It's the album's most depressing and somber track, with Mark and Matt singing to their families about how they feel selfish for abandoning them to follow their dreams in the band. It has basically the exact same subject matter as Home Is Such a Lonely Place on the last album, but literally every single bit of the song is far superior. This track feels much more genuine. It doesn't feel tacked on because they just needed a ballad. Mark and Matt both sing very emotively, and the lyrics don't feel as generic as they did on that former track. There are of course a few other tracks on the album, but I don't think they're really worth going into detail about. Generational Divide is literally the most pointless track on the album. It's just a short skate punk track which isn't unique or memorable, and for some reason has more writers than any other song on the album. I honestly don't understand that whatsoever, considering how little lyrics are actually in it. Runaway is basically just Hung Over You, but not as good. I like No Heart to Speak Of a lot, but I don't think it's a super unique track, and it's again very similar to Hung Over You. And I really don't like Ransom. The use of auto-tune over vocals that sound like Mark had a cold before there's really short hardcore breakdown just doesn't work for me and really isn't needed. It's a minute and a half and just feels like this unfinished track that they threw on because why not? Instrumentally, I think this album is a good step in the right direction. The guitar riffs aren't super unique, but I like that they aren't all the exact same thing trying to copy What's My Age Again in every song. The bass work is some of Mark's best to date, with Black Rain being a real standout for me. Travis's drum work is as amazing as it always is, and the incorporation of electronic program beats actually works a lot better than I expected it to. Although similar to on California, I do think the drums end up being quite compressed in the mix and don't really have a lot of power to them. Vocally, I think the album is a lot stronger than its predecessor also, especially when it comes to Matt, who actually feels like he belongs in the band now. On the previous album, he spent too much time trying to sound like Tom DeLonge, and I felt like it really strained his voice and did not work. On here, however, he feels a lot more comfortable singing, and it makes the experience much better to listen to. The album is a huge step up from what they did before, showing a lot more maturity with some really catchy songs and easily the most exciting instrumentation and best lyrics of this era of the band. There are a lot of issues, and nearly all of the singles were pretty dire, but I'm really enjoying this thing. Thanks for trying again, guys, I really appreciate it. I'm gonna have to give this new Blink-182 album 7.5 out of 10. Thanks for watching this review of the new Blink-182 album. If you've not checked out the videos yet, I am currently doing a review of all the Hella Mega Band's albums. So I'm doing all the Green Day, Weezer, and Fall Out Boy album reviews. Currently we've got the first 2 videos out with me reviewing the first 3 Green Day albums and reviewing the Blue album. The first Fall Out Boy video will hopefully be out in the next couple weeks, as well as a few movie reviews that I've had in the pipeline for a long time. So hopefully you guys subscribe if you're not already, and hopefully you guys check out those videos when they come out. Thanks for watching, guys, and I'll see you next time.